So our first assignment in crosshatching is going to be to complete a worksheet. And we're going to do a value scale. We're going to do some shading with hatching, crosshatching, stippling, and then using any of the techniques, we're going to shade a still life. One thing too to sort of be aware of as we begin is everybody's crosshatching is going to look slightly different. We all kind of have our own fingerprint when it comes to this. So also know that as you work on this, you're finding your own style. And so those three different samples. So let's take a look at the value scale and how you might begin cross-hatching. We're going to begin with perhaps the most difficult part of cross-hatching, and that's producing a gray. And what's difficult about that is that you really are just going to have widely spaced black lines. And I'm going to zoom in, so hopefully you can see that a little bit better. So up close, it's sort of this uncomfortable black and white stripes. And that's how you're going to create your grays, because your black pen can only produce pure black. So let's look at these other samples again and how they created their gray. So, again, slightly different, but it takes what we call a little optical mixing. Your eye is going to mix the black and white to make a gray. And that's a different experience. When you work with paint, you can literally mix black paint and white paint together, and you transform them, and they truly make gray. Here, we never really get to mix them. Your eye has to do the mixing. So that can be a little tricky at first. You have to look at your art from a distance. And then, of course, to get a deeper gray, I can mix some more lines. Now, one thing I want you to really take note of is that you want some neatness to this. I want my lines to go from the top to the bottom and then across. You don't want it to be sloppy. You want it to go edge to edge. So you can see how that actually looks a little bit darker. And of course, I would just keep progressing. My lines can get closer together. These single lines are called hatches. So this gray was made with just hatching. And then I started crossing over them. So these now are cross-hatched, and I can go any direction. I can cross it any way I want. So horizontal, vertical, diagonal. And I'm beginning to create a value scale. Let's zoom back out a bit. Let's look at it from a bit more of a distance, and you can start seeing those grays. That optical mixing really begins to work. And to jump into a completed one, you can really see how this open weaving of black lines really seems pretty gray. and then it gets darker, 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 and darkest. And that's how artists create their values using cross-hatching. This one is incredibly light. All right, now let's look at how to shade the cylinders. So I'm going to zoom back in, and I think because I want to show that challenge. So hatching means that the lines are going to not cross over each other. They're going to be parallel. So I'm going to tilt my paper to a comfortable angle. And this first step can be the one that's really uncomfortable for students. And what's kind of odd about it is this is my gray, these wide space lines. You're not going to get sort of this nice seamless transition that we're used to with pencil or paint. We're really going to get these lines. Now I got my gray. I'm going to go back in now and start developing my deeper gray, a little bit shorter, and then I'm going to go back in and develop my even lower value. And see that, again, look at that gray. It is just kind of these scraggly lines. And if you're looking at your drawing from up close, it may not be that convincing. You really have to look at it from a distance. And then I can, of course, draw hatch lines close together to create a cast shadow. More hatches. So let's take a look at one of the finished ones. Again, see that gray? It's just these sort of straggly lines. You don't get a real gray. I'm going to show this one as well. Look here. So that's that challenge. Sometimes they're in a drive for neatness. We keep filling it in, and then suddenly you lose the illusion of gray. And again, to sort of help you see that, it really has more of that illusion when you look at it from a distance. Suddenly, these scraggly lines that we see really do look like light gray. And we're going to do a similar technique for cross-hatching. So you can do your really open hatching to start creating your grays. And just like the other one, I can hatch inside of it to start creating a darker. And then I can cross-hatch as well. I like to turn my paper in directions that are comfortable for me. When we did our pencil shading, we talked about having this feather edge, this open weave for our shading. And in cross-hatching, it's the same technique, maybe just a little more noticeable. We have this open feathery edge. So I do my form shadow, highlight, cast shadow. And again, just like our pencil shading, only the highlight gets to be white. So I'm going to shade the background. This one, I will cross hatch the background. And again, I'm always working on neatness. We're hatching and cross-hatching, not just scribbling crazy. And again, I want my table to be a gray. And of course, follow your directions. Don't you don't have to do it exactly like mine. Everybody's is going to be slightly different. But everybody should be neat. Everybody should have a highlight, form shadow, cast shadow. And everybody should fill these squares with value, leaving only the highlights a true pure white. And so I would do similar kind of background in the hatching. Now stippling is pretty easy. You can do just little dashes. It's actually much easier to create your grays. The challenge to stippling is it just takes a lot of time. And you can slowly build up your grays. So I'm going to switch over to this sample since you probably don't want to watch me for an hour stipple. So we're going to stipple. And one thing I want to allow you to do is you can just color the background in. Stippling to create a large area of black really does take a huge amount of time. So we can just color our stipple background black. And then just spend the time stippling the table gray in the cylinder. So those are our three techniques: hatching, cross-hatching, stippling. And then on this still life down here, let's go ahead and shade the still life using any technique you want or all the techniques in one page. What you want to be sure is you want to be sure to have a consistent source of light. So it looks like this one is shaded from light coming from the left side. I have a highlight on the left, on the left, on the left. And as a result, my cast shadows fall to the right and shade the still life.